Let's move on to yesterday's primaries. Tuesday primaries, Michigan, Kansas, Missouri, and Washington State. Abby Livingston is a staff writer for Roll Call. Roll Call does comprehensive coverage of all the primaries. Those guys are up very late into the night covering these things, so we don't have to.
I know, I love it.
Abby Livingston, give us a nutshell. What exactly were the headlines coming out of yesterday's primaries?
Well, the big headline, Kansas Senate, longtime Senator Pat Roberts won. It was not a blowout, but he survived a Tea Party challenger. It's always a big deal at roll call when an incumbent loses. That happened last night with Congressman Kerry Benevolio of Michigan. That was expected. And Tea Party Republican, libertarian-minded Justin Amash survived his primary challenge in Michigan as well.
Let's first focus on Pat Roberts. Pat Roberts is seen and sort of painted as an establishment, D.C.-centric senator. That one of the big beefs on him is that he wasn't in his home state enough, right? What was his formula for success against the Tea Party challenger?
Well, when it first was revealed how little he has gone back to Kansas, he was in Richard Lugar territory of being in trouble. Lugar being the senator from Indiana who lost 2 years ago. I think it had more to do with his opponent being an incredibly flawed candidate. His opponent was a physician. He had put photos of surgical procedures on Facebook, which is pretty egregious in the medical community. And so I think it was more of a self-destructive rival rather than anything he did very brilliantly, if that makes sense.
So what's your overall impression about the Tea Party challengers this cycle of the elections that, happened last night? It sounds like that they're flawed.
I think it has. The only one who really has prevailed, unless I'm missing someone, is the Eric Cantor race.
Right.
It's hard to fire an incumbent unless you've got the element of surprise. And what we've seen are incumbents, both Tea Party and establishment, who were challenged, and they were prepared and they fought hard. Justin Amash survived. He had a bunch of money from the business Republican community spent against him, and I think it has less to do with ideology than running a functional campaign and knowing what you have on your hands.
Let's turn over to the Wolverine State, though. In Michigan, you did mention that Representative Bentivolio did lose. He a Republican incumbent. He or she, Kerry. I'm unfamiliar with Kerry. It is. All right, thank you for that. I'm unfamiliar with him. I do know the 11th District, though. I actually grew up near there. Attorney David Trott won, but this was not one of those grassroots insurgency Tea Party kind of things. What is David Trott's deal? Is he more of a libertarian type?
No, the last thing you can read into this race is some sort of Tea Party libertarian divide. It's a very special case. Congressman Benevolio is what we call in Washington an accidental congressman. He was elected on a fluke. It's Thaddeus McCotter's former seat.
Yes.
McCotter, having fallen into some serious ballot problems, was no longer on the ballot in 2012, and Benevolio was the Republican left who had just signed up to run. It was viewed he would be in trouble from the very beginning, and he did not run a good campaign. There were lots of lawsuits and accusations and firings and leavings, and he didn't raise very much money. And so pretty much everyone saw this one coming. He was associated with the Tea Party. He had called for President Obama's impeachment about a year ago. In a previous career, he was a high school teacher and a veteran, but he also had been someone who dressed up as Santa for Christmas, so he kind of became caricatured within the Washington
there's
world.
Nothing wrong with dressing up as Santa Claus necessarily.
Yeah, I love Santa.
Me
so
too.
I never caricatured him, but he also raised reindeer on a ranch, and so there was a lot of mockery that they
but see, this is where the stuff doesn't even become about the issues anymore. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah. It's not about Santa Claus. Come on.
And I didn't write about it that much.
No, I know you didn't.
He was known.
Yeah.
And Trott was of the establishment. Mitt Romney endorsed him. Trott was a self-funder.
Well, let the record reflect here, and I'm glad we've cleared this up. Abby Livingston, staff writer of Roll Call, has nothing against Santa Claus.
No, she
personally.
doesn't.
In fact, you are pro-Santa, are you not?
She said she was.
Believe me, I love Santa.
I don't want to drag you into. I know that you guys at Roll Call like to, not take one side or the other, but I think we can all hold hands and agree that Santa is a good thing.
Yeah, she's not going to be calling Santa by any other name.
Let's. But there are a couple of high-profile Republicans who are retiring. Dave Camp and Mike Rogers, both chairmen of committees, very powerful committees in the House of Representatives. Who's going to be replacing those two?
There is a state senator who won the GOP nomination in the Camp seat. His name is John Molinar. I hope I'm saying it correctly. Mm-hmm. And a former state legislator won the GOP nomination for Mike Rogers named Mike Bishop. But the interesting thing is less about who those members are than the fact that these are not competitive races. In a good year for Democrats, open seat races, they'd be going after these. But the Camp seat's pretty much off the it's off the radar. The Rogers seat, Democrats make some noise about it, but their incumbent had a lot of trouble in the primary. Not incumbent, but their preferred nominee almost didn't get out of it, and so it's hard to see them focusing. Never say never, but the bigger story is that that's a reflection of the Democratic climate, that this is not a good season.
One other question, and yesterday, and listen, one of the hottest domestic issues over the last 6 weeks obviously has been the border crisis, the immigration issue, and both sides of the political equation have suggested that it plays into their hands electorally. Did that issue play into yesterday's results at all in the primaries?
I didn't see any evidence of it. Not really. What I can say about that was I was at the Capitol last week, and I had several Democratic members pull me aside, and this was the first optimism I'd seen out of Dems in the House since the Florida special that they lost in March, where there was just widespread panic. There was, and I think it had almost less to do with immigration than just the dysfunction that we were watching, that votes were falling apart. And it was the first time I really saw them say, you know what, this is the thing that when we come back from recess, this sort of stuff may change the trajectory. Not arrogant, not cocky, but just maybe things aren't as bad as we thought.
Was that specific to the immigration and border issue, or just a question of whether the House leadership, the Republican leadership, has their act together?
I think it's a little of both. Immigration is a really difficult issue to look at politically. It's really hard to wrap my head around it because it plays in one way in Republican primaries. It just splinters. The way I've seen it, it's a long-term problem for Republicans. I think most people agree. But I think the general dysfunction within the GOP conference is what they were referring to. It was the immigration vote at hand, but
gotcha.
It felt very much like the shutdown.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for that rundown. We got to leave it there. Abby Livingston, staff writer of Roll Call, thanks for giving us the breakdown on yesterday's primaries.
Thank you for